Emily from Autofy here to talk to you about the Autofy Mapper. The Mapper is a great feature within the Autofy workflow step that allows you to determine what information is going to be syncing from your source object to your destination object. This mapper can be found on each individual step by clicking on this Mapper tab. And from here, you can see all the fields that have already been mapped. Now, when you expand each of these trees, you can see the information that is going to be mapped on your records. One example of something that you might want to map on a record, such as the opportunity to an invoice, besides the regular header information, the customer name, the name of the opportunity, the line items, of course, you may want to sync something over into the message field in QuickBooks. In order to do that, you can add brand new field mappings. You can also edit and remove field mappings, and we're also going to show you how you can do static mappings. I'm going to click on New Field. What you'll see on the left side of the mapper here is all the fields that you have available in your Salesforce object. And then over here to the right, this is our destination object, which is QuickBooks Online. And we can see the fields that we have available to us on the invoice object within QuickBooks Online. And I actually want to map the description field on my opportunity to my customer message field on the invoice side. So all I have to do at this point is select the field that I want to map from my Salesforce side and select the field that I want to map it to on the QuickBooks side. And what you're going to notice right down here is we do give you a warning letting you know that the source field has a longer maximum length than the destination maximum length. And that's a heads up that you may have an error on this particular field when you're doing a sync, because QuickBooks only allows so many characters within each field. A good rule of thumb for that is to take whatever field you're using in Salesforce and making sure that the character limit is set to equal what is in QuickBooks. This way you don't run into an error when you try to sync a record that has more characters than QuickBooks will allow. I'm going to go ahead and click on Save. It does fall to the bottom of that particular section. So we can see right here, if I close up my customer and line item lists, I can see that the description from Salesforce is going to be mapped to the customer message in QuickBooks. Depending on the subscription level of Autofy that you have, you can add custom fields as part of your sync. So if we have some custom fields created in QuickBooks and I want to sync specific information from Salesforce to those fields, I have the ability to do that. I'm going to open up QuickBooks, and within QuickBooks, I want to see what my 3 custom fields are that I want to be syncing to. So my PO number, my contract start date, and sales rep. So back in my Autofy Mapper, I am going to sync over the contract start date. So on my Salesforce side, I have a field that I've created called QB contract start. And I need to add this to my mapper on the QuickBooks side. To make life easier, because we are going to be looking for an exact character match, I'm going to go ahead and copy the text right here from the custom field in QuickBooks. Go back to my mapper and click on Add Custom Field and paste that in there and say OK. So now we'll see a new tree or a new list called Custom Fields, and click on Contract Start and Save. So that's how easy it is to be able to map to custom fields that you have in QuickBooks. Now, I might also want to include a static mapping. And what a static mapping allows you to do to assign the same value to a specific field every single time a record syncs. So let's say every single time I'm creating an opportunity and I want that to sync over to QuickBooks as an invoice, our invoices are always going to have 30-day payment terms, no matter what. these invoices that are being created from Salesforce opportunities will always have 30-day terms. Now I can assign that per customer on the QuickBooks side. I could assign that on every single opportunity, or I can have Autofy assign that during the sync. In order to add the static value mapping, we're already in our mapper here. So I'm going to select over on the right the terms tree, and I'm going to click on full name. So we're going to assign a specific value to the terms full name field. In order to do the static value up on the left, I click on static value. Now I do want to make sure that the value I put in here matches exactly to what is in my pick list in QuickBooks. So I'm going to go into settings in QuickBooks, and I'm just going to double check. It's net 30, and I'm going to assign the value of net 30 and click on save. Now we can see the terms that we've added as a static mapping, and you'll know that it's statically matched because it is enclosed in quotes. We've added our description field, and we've also added our custom field. To get out of the mapper, I'm just going to go ahead and click cancel. If I want to edit or delete a current mapping, I can do so. In order to edit the mapping, when I mouse over my map fields, I can click on edit, and this will bring up the mapper for me. If I want to adjust the name that I'm assigning to this invoice, or if I want my opportunity name to sync elsewhere, I can do that. Now, if I decide that I want the opportunity name to be in the customer message, keep in mind that we have already done that. So if I try to map the same field from my source to two different fields in my destination, it's not going to allow me to do that. Autofy has a one-to-one rule. Keep in mind that we're moving data from one location to the other. We're not doing anything with that data in between. We're literally just taking it from one place and delivering it elsewhere. So we can map a field once. We cannot map it more than once. And you'll see this notification pop up that it's already being mapped. If there's a different field that you'd like to assign this to, you can. I'm going to go ahead and click cancel. And I might have some information that I want to delete altogether. Maybe I don't care about the website or updating the customer information while I'm doing my opportunity to invoice sync, so I can delete it. The system does confirm that I want to delete this map field, and I just say yes. I can very easily go back in and add that field if I want to. It's very simple to edit and delete. Anytime that you're creating a brand new step, depending on the object, you always want to make sure that you have these ID fields mapped. So right here we have our opportunity ID mapped to our external ID. In the default mapping, when you create a new step, which you will see most of the time, is that these IDs will already be mapped for you. You don't want to delete those. This is how Autofy does the record matching behind the scenes. So you want to make sure that those stay intact. And if we go to our customer to account step and we click on the mapper, then you'll see right here that we do have that QuickBooks external ID being mapped to the account ID. So the source destination object ID being mapped to the destination object ID. You just want to make sure that those stay intact, and we'll see that as well on our mapper for our items. Another thing to point out when you're utilizing the mapper, and you'll notice in this step right here, is that Salesforce does have some required fields, and that will be right here. A good rule of thumb when you're creating a new step is to think about what fields are required in both systems. So if you're syncing with QuickBooks and Salesforce, what are your required fields when you create a brand new product in Salesforce? The product name is always required. But do you have additional fields set up to be required when that's being created in Salesforce? If you do, you want to keep that in mind when you're creating a new step, so that way you have all of those fields mapped. Same thing if we're creating a new item in QuickBooks, which fields are going to be required. And I'll show you an example. If I go add a step and I want this particular item to product step to be bi-directional, meaning it syncs both ways, I'm going to click on add step real quick here, and we are going to be syncing our products from Salesforce to QuickBooks. One thing to point out with this mapper is that we do throw fields in here already for you that are default, that are used essentially on both sides, both objects. But one thing that you'll notice isn't here, because Salesforce does not have a requirement for this, is the QuickBooks income account. This is a required field when you create a brand new item in QuickBooks. So two options here. You can create a field in QuickBooks that will determine the income account when you sync from Salesforce to QuickBooks. Or if all of your items fall under a specific income account, they're always under that income account, you can always do a static mapping. So I could say that this is going to be cost of goods sold. Any particular item that we sync over to QuickBooks is always going to have the income account of cost of goods sold. Not typical, but it is a possibility. So I want to make sure that my income account is set to cost of goods sold. And you'll notice that when you go through a sync, if something errors out, we will tell you why that record errored out. And that's how simple it is to use the mapper. So keep in mind with the mapper, relationships are one-to-one between fields. If you want to see information populated from Salesforce into QuickBooks or from your source object to your destination object, you want to make sure it's mapped. We're not going to pull over information that is not mapped. So if you want to see it populate from your source into your destination, make sure that it's mapped. You can add new fields if you need to. You can add static mappings. Depending on your Autofy subscription level, you can also map fields to custom fields in your destination object. Make sure you hit that subscribe button down below so you'll be notified of any new videos that we post. And as always, if you guys have questions, please reach out to support@getautofy.com.